The charity poker tournament at the Grandstone Country Club was supposed to be an easy win for Skylar Bowen. As CEO of Cascade Tech Solutions, she'd crushed bigger opponents than the quiet software engineer sitting across from her. But when Parker Drake called her bluff with a straight flush, everything changed. The stakes? If she lost, she'd have to spend 2 full weeks living in his modest apartment, experiencing his real world, as he called it. She'd laughed at the absurdity. Certain victory was hers. Now, standing outside his weathered building in North Harbor with her designer luggage, Skylar realized she'd made a catastrophic mistake. This wasn't just about losing a bet. Parker Drake wasn't just some random engineer. And his 9-year-old daughter wasn't just going to watch from the sideline. What happened over those 2 weeks would shatter everything Skylar thought she knew about success, sacrifice, and what it truly means to have it all. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The charity poker tournament at the Grandstone Country Club had attracted the usual crowd of North Harbor's elite. Tech executives, venture capitalists, and old money families gathered around felt-top tables, pretending their $1,000 buy-ins would actually help underprivileged students get coding education. Skylar Bowen surveyed the room with the cool assessment that had made her the youngest female CEO in Cascade Tech Solutions history. At 34, she'd turned a failing software company into a $5 billion enterprise. She didn't lose at business, and she certainly didn't lose at poker. The tournament had been running for 3 hours. Most players had been eliminated. Now only 2 remained at the final table under the crystal chandeliers and watchful eyes of 200 spectators. Skylar sat across from Parker Drake, a man she vaguely recognized from somewhere in her company's vast organizational chart. Mid-level software engineer, she assumed. Someone forgettable who'd gotten lucky tonight. He was unremarkable in the way working-class men often were. Dark hair slightly too long, a sports jacket that had seen better days worn over a button-down shirt without a tie. His hands were steady as he arranged his chips, and his gray eyes revealed nothing. The final hand came down to a river card that could change everything. Skylar held 2 pair, kings and tens, strong, but not unbeatable. The pot had grown to $47,000, all going to the scholarship fund. She studied Parker across the table. He'd been conservative all night, folding more often than playing. This was only his 3rd significant bet of the evening. Everything about his body language suggested uncertainty. "I'll raise," Skylar said, pushing a stack of chips forward. "Another 5,000. Parker looked at his cards, then at her, then back at his cards. The hesitation was obvious. "Perfect. Actually," Parker said slowly, and Skylar prepared for his fold. "I'd like to propose something different." The room quieted. Even the waitstaff stopped moving. "I don't have 5,000 in chips left," he continued, "but I'd like to raise you anyway. A side bet, separate from the charity pot." Skylar's perfectly shaped eyebrow arched. "I'm listening. If I win this hand, you spend 2 weeks living in my apartment in North Harbor, experiencing how the other half lives. No hotels, no expense accounts, no assistants. Just you, seeing what life is really like for the people whose code built your company." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone laughed nervously. This was absurd. CEOs didn't slum it with employees. "And if I win?" Skylar asked, amused despite herself. "I'll resign from Cascade Tech. Leave quietly. No severance demands. No complaints. You'll never have to see my forgettable face again." The audacity was almost refreshing. Almost. Skylar leaned back in her chair, red lips curving into a smile that had preceded hostile takeovers and devastating negotiations. She knew what he was doing. This was some misguided attempt to teach her a lesson about class consciousness or wealth privilege. How quaint. 2 weeks, she said. In your apartment. Doing what exactly? Living like a normal person. Grocery shopping, cooking, taking the bus, and helping with my daughter Mia's homework and her after-school activities. Full immersion. You have a daughter? This detail made it even more absurd. She'd be expected to play house with some engineer's family? I do. She's 9. Brilliant. And she'd benefit from seeing that powerful women exist outside of screens. The manipulation was transparent. But Skylar didn't care. She held 2 pair against a man who'd been scared money all night. This wasn't even a gamble. Deal, she said, extending her hand across the table. They shook, and the tournament director quickly drafted a simple agreement on grandstone letterhead. Both signed. Call, Parker said, matching her bet with his final chips. Skylar laid down her cards with a flourish. 2 pair. Kings and tens. Parker's expression didn't change. He simply turned over his cards, one by one. 7 of hearts, 8 of hearts, 9 of hearts, 10 of hearts, Jack of hearts, a straight flush. The room exploded. People were standing, pointing, gasping. Someone shouted about the odds. The tournament director was verifying the hand, but there was no mistake. Skylar sat frozen, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. She'd been played. The nervous hesitation, the conservative betting all night, the seemingly desperate side bet. All of it had been theater. Parker Drake stood, collecting his portion of the charity pot with quiet efficiency. He walked around the table and stopped beside her chair. My address is 2847 Harborview Terrace, apartment 4B. He said softly, so only she could hear. Move. In day is Saturday. I'll expect you by noon. Pack light. We don't have much storage space. He walked away before she could respond, disappearing through the crowd of stunned spectators. Skylar sat there, still processing, as people began approaching with questions and barely concealed glee. The untouchable CEO had just been hustled by a nobody. This would be all over the tech blogs by morning. Her assistant, Bailey Warren, appeared at her elbow. What just happened? Did you actually agree to live with an employee? Apparently, Skylar said, her voice tight. We can fight it. That agreement isn't legally binding. You signed under duress, caught up in the moment. No. Skylar stood, smoothing her Oscar de la Renta dress. I made a bet. I lost. I'll honor it. Pride wouldn't let her do anything else. Skylar Bowen's word meant something, even when that word had been given foolishly. She had Bailey run a background check on Parker Drake immediately. The report came back, within hours, and it only deepened her confusion. Parker Drake, 36 years old. Current position: Senior Software Engineer at Cascade Tech Solutions, Infrastructure Division. Salary, $170,000 annually. Education, PhD in Computer Science from Stanford. Former position, Chief Technology Officer at NeuralSync Systems. Skylar sat up straighter. NeuralSync Systems. She knew that company. They'd been a rising star in AI infrastructure 5 years ago, valued at over $800 million. Then they'd collapsed spectacularly amid some internal crisis she couldn't quite remember. Parker Drake had been their CTO. He'd walked away from millions in stock options and equity. Now, he was a mid-level engineer, making a good, but unremarkable salary. The report continued. Married to Diana Drake. Divorced 4 years ago. Sole custody of daughter Mia Drake. Age 9. No criminal record. No debt beyond a modest car payment. Lived in North Harbor, a working-class neighborhood 40 minutes from Cascade Tech's campus. A man who'd gone from the C-suite to middle management, who'd lost everything and rebuilt small, who'd somehow read her so perfectly across a poker table that he'd engineered this entire situation. Saturday morning arrived with the inevitability of a execution. Skylar packed 2 weeks' worth of clothes into luggage that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her penthouse in Belmont Heights felt like a sanctuary she was being exiled from. Bailey drove her to North Harbor in her Tesla, both of them silent as the neighborhoods changed from glass towers to modest apartment complexes. 2847 Harborview Terrace was a 4-story brick building that had been old when Skylar was born. The paint was faded. The parking lot was cracked, but it was clean, maintained, and had flower boxes in several windows. "I'll be checking in daily," Bailey said as they pulled up. "Any problems, any inappropriate behavior, anything at all, and we extract you immediately." "I'll be fine," Skylar said with more confidence than she felt. "It's 2 weeks. I've survived worse." She'd negotiated with hostile boards, fired executives twice her age, rebuilt entire company divisions from scratch. She could handle 2 weeks in a working-class apartment. Parker Drake answered on the second knock, and Skylar got her first good look at him in natural light rather than the dim ambiance of the country club. He was taller than she remembered, maybe 6'1", with an athletic build that suggested he actually used his gym membership rather than just paying for it. The too long hair was intentional, not neglectful. His gray eyes were intelligent and assessing. "Right on time," he said. "That's good. Mia values punctuality." He stepped aside, letting her enter a world she'd never truly inhabited. Skylar Bowen hadn't always been the ice queen of Silicon Valley's tech sector. There had been a time, brief and distant, when she'd believed in connection, trust, and the fundamental goodness of people. That belief had died on her 21st birthday in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and regret. She'd been born Skylar Chen to parents who'd immigrated from Taiwan with engineering degrees and burning ambition. Her father, David Chen, had been a brilliant semiconductor designer. Her mother, Lin Chen, had taught mathematics at the university level while raising Skylar and her younger brother. They'd been the model minority family. High-achieving, respectful, quiet. David worked 60-hour weeks at TechCore Industries, while Lin pushed both offspring toward academic excellence. Skylar had tested into gifted programs by age 7, skipped 2 grades, and entered MIT at 16. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She'd been home on winter break during her junior year when everything shattered. Her mother had called her into the study, face pale, hands shaking. Lin Chen was not a woman who shook. She was controlled, measured, perfect. "Your father has been having an affair," her mother said without preamble, "with his assistant. For 6 years." Skylar had felt the floor tilt beneath her. 6 years meant it started when she was 14. It meant every family dinner, every graduation, every achievement had been built on lies. "I'm filing for divorce," Lin continued. "But there's something you need to know. The house, our savings, everything is gone. Your father took out loans against our assets to support her. A second apartment. Gifts. Trips. We're in debt." Skylar. Serious debt. The divorce had been brutal. David Chen had used his connections, his charm, his position to paint Lin as mentally unstable. He'd produced emails taken out of context, testimony from colleagues who owed him favors, even questioned Lin's fitness as a mother. He'd won. Not full custody, but enough to devastate. He'd kept the house, most of the assets, even the college fund Skylar's mother had carefully built. Lin Chen had moved into a small apartment in a bad neighborhood. She'd taken a job teaching at a community college for a fraction of her former salary, and she'd started having chest pains. On Skylar's 21st birthday, her mother had a massive heart attack while preparing dinner alone in that small apartment. The doctors said it was stress-induced cardiomyopathy. Broken heart syndrome, they called it. Though they insisted it was a real medical condition. Lin Chen survived, but something fundamental had broken. She was quieter now, smaller somehow. The woman who'd pushed Skylar to excellence was replaced by someone who shuffled through days without joy. Skylar had sat beside her hospital bed and made a decision that would define the next 13 years of her life. Never be vulnerable. Never trust charm. Never let anyone close enough to destroy you. She'd finished MIT in 3 years instead of 4, working 3 jobs simultaneously. She'd gone directly to business school at Stanford, graduating top of her class. She'd chosen tech because it was ruthlessly meritocratic. Code either worked or it didn't. Success was measurable, quantifiable, immune to the kind of emotional manipulation that had destroyed her family. At 25, she'd been hired as a junior executive at Cascade Tech Solutions, then a struggling mid-sized software company. At 28, she'd staged a boardroom coup that removed the incompetent CEO and installed herself in his place. At 30, she'd tripled the company's value through aggressive expansion and strategic acquisitions. Now, at 34, she commanded a tech empire worth billions. Forbes called her visionary. TechCrunch called her ruthless. Her board called her whatever they needed to call her to justify their massive stock options. The media loved her story. Immigrant daughter makes good. She never corrected them about her father. Never mentioned that he'd remarried his assistant and now lived in a mansion in Palo Alto while her mother rented a 1-bedroom in San Jose. Skylar had bought her mother a house, tried to buy her a life, but Lin Chen had refused most of it. Money doesn't fix broken things, she'd said. It just covers them up. The lesson had been clear. Love was a liability. Family was a weakness. Trust was a weapon people used against you. Skylar had built her life accordingly. She dated occasionally, men from appropriate backgrounds with appropriate ambitions. The relationships lasted months, never years. They ended at the first sign of real intimacy, the first moment someone tried to move beyond surface-level connection. Her penthouse in Belmont Heights was a monument to her success and her isolation. 1,200 square feet of glass and steel, professionally decorated with art she'd never chosen, and furniture she rarely used. It was beautiful and empty, exactly like the life she'd built. She told herself she was happy. Success was happiness. Financial security was happiness. Never being vulnerable was happiness. But sometimes, late at night, when the city lights blurred together below her windows, she thought about her mother's words, about broken things and cover-ups, about how the only relationship she truly maintained was with work. Her employees feared her. Her board respected her. Her competitors hated her. But nobody knew her. Not really. That was the point. Knowledge was power, and she'd given away too much power once before. Skylar Bowen had learned her lessons young and learned them completely. People were assets or liabilities. Relationships were transactional. Emotions were vulnerabilities to be eliminated. She ran Cascade Tech the way she ran her life, with ruthless efficiency, strategic calculation, and zero tolerance for anything that couldn't be quantified on a spreadsheet. When employees complained about work-life balance, she'd remind them that balance was a luxury for people who didn't want to win. When her executive team pushed back on aggressive timelines, she'd replace them with people who understood that impossible was just another word for difficult. The tech blogs called her the Ice Queen. They meant it as criticism. She wore it as armor. She didn't need love. She didn't need family beyond her mother, maintained at a careful distance. She didn't need anything except the next quarter's earnings, the next acquisition, the next victory that proved she was untouchable. Parker Drake's poker game had been the first time in years someone had outmaneuvered her. The first time someone had seen through her calculations and read her perfectly. It shouldn't have been possible. She was too careful, too controlled, too practiced at revealing nothing. Yet he'd done it. With a straight flush and a bet that forced her into exactly this situation. Standing in the cramped entryway of his North Harbor apartment, Skylar realized something uncomfortable. This wasn't random. Parker Drake had planned this. Researched her, probably. Studied her. Engineered a scenario designed to crack her carefully maintained armor. The question was why? What did a former CTO turned mid-level engineer want from the woman who ran his company? What lesson was he trying to teach? And why did it matter to him at all? Parker Drake's apartment was nothing like the minimalist showrooms Skylar was accustomed to. It was lived in, layered with the evidence of actual human existence. A couch that had seen better days but was covered with a handmade quilt. Bookshelves crammed with technical manuals, paperback novels, and what appeared to be a complete collection of robotics magazines. A kitchen table scarred from years of homework, craft projects, and family dinners. Photos everywhere, moments captured and displayed with pride rather than professional curation. Living room, Parker said, gesturing around. Kitchen through there. Bathroom down the hall. You'll be in Mia's room. She's excited to sleep on the couch for 2 weeks. She thinks it's camping. I can't take a 9-year-old's bedroom, Skylar protested. You can and you will. The couch kills my back but doesn't bother her. Besides, she insisted, said a guest gets the real bed. Before Skylar could argue further, a whirlwind of energy burst through the apartment door. Mia Drake was small for 9, all elbows and knees, and untamed brown curls that had escaped whatever hair tie had attempted to contain them. She wore jeans with grass stains, a t-shirt that said, "Girls Who Code," and carried a backpack that looked heavy enough to contain textbooks for a college student. "You're here," she exclaimed, dropping the backpack and approaching Skylar with the kind of unself-conscious confidence that only kids possessed. "I'm Mia. Dad says you're going to stay with us because you lost a bet." "That's so cool. I've never met anyone who lost a bet that big before." "Mia," Parker said gently, inside voice, "and maybe give Miss Bowen some space." "It's fine," Skylar said, surprising herself. "And you can call me Skylar." Up close, she could see that Mia had her father's gray eyes, but with a spark of something else. Intelligence, curiosity, and zero fear of authority figures. "Dad says you run Cascade Tech. That's where he works. He writes code for the infrastructure that keeps all your servers running. I want to do that someday. But with robots, instead of computers." "Well, robots are computers. But you know what I mean." "I do," Skylar said, and found herself almost smiling at the girl's enthusiasm. Parker had been watching this exchange with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Mia, why don't you show Skylar your room? I'll bring her bags in." Mia's room was exactly what you'd expect from a 9-year-old with serious academic interests. Posters of female scientists covered the walls. NASA photographs. A desk with a junior robotics kit partially assembled. Books stacked everywhere, from Harry Potter to actual programming textbooks simplified for young readers. "I'm building a robot that can sort recycling automatically," Mia explained. "People put the wrong things in recycling bins all the time, and it messes up the whole process. My robot will have sensors to identify materials and sort them correctly. Dad's helping me with the code." "That's impressive," Skylar said, and meant it. This wasn't a hobby. This was serious work. "Dad says I can be anything I want if I work hard enough. He used to run a big company, did you know? Before everything happened." "Everything?" Skylar asked carefully. Mia's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. "Before Mom left. Before we moved here. Dad doesn't like talking about it much." Parker appeared in the doorway with Skylar's luggage, his expression unreadable. "Mia, homework, kitchen table. I'll check it in an hour." Mia grabbed her backpack and disappeared, leaving Skylar alone with Parker in the small bedroom. "She doesn't know the whole story," Parker said quietly. "And I'd appreciate it if we kept it that way." "What is the whole story?" Skylar asked. She'd read the background check, but those only captured facts, not truth. Parker was silent for a long moment, then sighed. "You ran a check on me. I know you did. So you know I was CTO at NeuralSync Systems. I know you walked away. I don't know why." Parker moved to the window, looking out at the parking lot below. "NeuralSync was my company. Well, mine and 2 co-founders. We were developing AI infrastructure for cloud computing. Cutting-edge stuff. Investors loved us. We were valued at $800 million and climbing." He paused, and Skylar waited. "I was married to Diana. Met her in grad school. She was brilliant, ambitious, beautiful. Everything I thought I wanted. We had Mia when we were 27. It wasn't planned, but we made it work. Or I thought we made it work." What changed? Skylar asked. Diana had postpartum depression. Serious, debilitating depression. But she wouldn't get help. Said it would look weak, that it would hurt her career. She was working for a venture capital firm, on track for partner. Parker turned back to face her. I tried to be supportive. Took on more with Mia. Hired help. Suggested therapy. Nothing worked. And Neural Sync was exploding. We just closed a Series C funding round. I was working 90-hour weeks. Traveling constantly. Missing everything. What happened? Skylar asked, though she was starting to piece it together. I came home from a conference in London. Mia was 4. I found her sitting in the kitchen, alone. She'd been alone for 6 hours. Diana had left to go to a spa weekend with friends. Didn't tell anyone. Didn't arrange childcare. Just left our 4-year-old alone. Skylar felt something cold settle in her chest. That was my wake-up moment, Parker continued. I'd been so focused on building something, on success, on proving I could be brilliant and have it all. But I was failing at the only thing that actually mattered, being a father. So you left Neural Sync? I resigned the next day, gave up my equity, my salary, everything. My co-founders thought I was insane. The board tried to talk me out of it, but Mia needed me, and she needed me present. Actually present, not just existing in the same house. And your wife? Ex-wife. Diana filed for divorce 3 months later. Said I'd destroyed our future. Destroyed her future. She moved to New York. Took a job at a hedge fund. Sees Mia twice a year. Sometimes less. Sends money. Sends gifts. Sends nothing that actually matters. Parker's voice was steady, but Skylar heard the old pain underneath. I took the job at Cascade Tech because it paid well enough to support us and had reasonable hours. I work 45 hours a week, maybe 50 during crunch time. I pick Mia up from school, help with homework, go to robotics club meetings. We have dinner together every night. She's my priority. Always. He looked directly at Skylar. So yeah, I walked away from millions, from prestige, from the career everyone said I'd be crazy to leave, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Why did you make that bet? Skylar asked. Why force me here? Parker smiled slightly. Because I've been working at Cascade Tech for 3 years. I've watched you run the company from a distance. I've seen how you treat people, how you think we're all just code to be debugged or deleted based on performance metrics. That's business, Skylar said. That's isolation, Parker corrected. And I've been where you are. I know what it's like to believe success is everything. I want you to see what I learned. That the things you can't quantify are the only things that actually matter. Their first encounter had happened 8 months before the poker tournament, though Skylar barely remembered it until Parker reminded her 3 days into her stay. It was a Wednesday morning during her second week in the apartment. Mia had left for school, and Skylar was attempting to make coffee using Parker's ancient drip machine that required actual filters and manual pouring. Do you remember the server crash last March? Parker asked from the doorway. Skylar looked up from her battle with the coffee maker. We have dozens of server issues. Which one? The one that took down the entire West Coast infrastructure for 6 hours. Cost the company approximately $40 million in lost productivity and client compensation. That one, she remembered. It had been catastrophic. Every executive had been called in, every engineer mobilized. The board had demanded answers she couldn't provide. What about it? She asked. I fixed it. Well, I found the problem. A cascade failure in the load balancing system that your senior architects had completely missed. Skylar paused, coffee forgotten. You fixed the March crash. I identified the issue. Your infrastructure team was focused on the hardware, convinced it was a physical failure. I realized it was a software conflict in the allocation algorithms. 3 lines of code, improperly nested. I rewrote them, and everything came back online. I don't remember that, Skylar admitted. I know you don't, because you never came down to the engineering floor. You sent your chief technology officer, who took the credit. He presented the solution to you and the board as his own work. Got a $200,000 bonus for it. The memory was coming back now. Gregory Hamilton had indeed presented a solution, claimed he'd personally debugged the system. She'd been so relieved to have the crisis resolved that she hadn't questioned it. But that's not what I'm talking about, Parker continued. I'm talking about what happened after. When you finally did come down to the engineering floor. Skylar had no memory of this. It was 3 days after the crash. You were doing a walkthrough with your executive team, showing the board members how hands-on you were, how connected to the actual work. Parker moved into the kitchen, taking over the coffee-making process with practiced efficiency. You walked past my desk. I was in the middle of debugging another issue, something minor but annoying. I had documentation spread across 3 monitors, code on a 4th. He poured water into the machine, measured grounds with precision. You stopped, looked at my workspace, and you said, "This area is a mess. Whoever works here needs to learn basic organizational skills. It reflects poorly on the entire division." Skylar felt heat creep up her neck. She said things like that constantly, performance feedback delivered in the moment. She couldn't possibly remember every instance. Your VP of engineering apologized to you, right there, in front of everyone. Promised to address the organizational issues in the infrastructure team. I was sitting right there. You were talking about my workspace like I didn't exist. I didn't know. Skylar started. You didn't know because you didn't see me. I wasn't a person to you. I was a desk that was too messy, a problem to be managed. You literally looked at me, made eye contact for half a second, and then looked away like I was furniture. Parker handed her a cup of coffee, perfectly prepared. After you left, I cleaned my desk, organized everything, made it pristine. And then I went home and told Mia that sometimes people in power don't see the people who actually do the work. Skylar sat down at the kitchen table, coffee untouched. What did she say? She asked me if you were a mean person or just a busy person. I told her I didn't know, that sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. The story settled uncomfortably in Skylar's chest. She'd been so focused on the crisis, on the board, on the financial impact, that individual engineers had been invisible. Just resources to be allocated. There's more, Parker said, sitting across from her. A week later, there was a company-wide email. A directive from your office about workplace standards. Professional appearance. Organized workspaces. It specifically mentioned that engineers who couldn't maintain basic organization might not be suited for senior positions. That was about you? Skylar asked. That was because of me. Because you'd seen one messy desk during a crisis and decided it represented a company-wide problem that needed a policy memo. Parker leaned back in his chair. Do you know what happened after that memo went out? 3 people in my division stayed late every night for a week, cleaning and organizing. Terrified they'd be seen as unprofessional. One of them, Jenny Rodriguez, has severe anxiety. She had a panic attack because she couldn't figure out how to organize her reference materials in a way that would meet your undefined standards. I never meant, Skylar started, but Parker held up a hand. I know you never meant it. That's the problem. You never meant any of it. You were just being efficient, addressing issues as you saw them. But every policy you write, every comment you make, every time you look through someone instead of at them, there are real consequences for real people. He stood, rinsing his coffee cup in the sink. After the memo, I knew exactly who you were. Brilliant, successful, completely disconnected from the human cost of your decisions. You're not cruel. You're just isolated at the top, making choices about people you've never actually seen. Is that why you made the bet? Skylar asked. Some elaborate revenge? No, Parker said, turning to face her. Revenge would be easy. I wanted you to see, really see, What it's like down here in the world you affect but never experience. He checked his watch. I need to get to work. There's a list on the fridge of what Mia needs for school tomorrow. Bake sale. She's making cookies tonight. You're helping. I don't bake, Skylar said. You do now, Parker replied. Welcome to the real world, where executives don't get to opt out of the basic work of living. After he left, Skylar sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at her expensive coffee that tasted like ash and accountability. She pulled out her phone and opened her email. Found the March memo about workplace standards. Read it with new eyes. It was 3 paragraphs of corporate language about professionalism and organizational excellence. Perfectly reasonable. Completely divorced from the reality of people like Jenny Rodriguez having panic attacks. She thought about the server crash, about Parker identifying the problem while senior architects with double his salary had failed, about Gregory Hamilton taking credit and a $200,000 bonus, about how she'd looked right at Parker and seen nothing worth remembering. The first rule of business she'd learned was that people were resources. You allocated them efficiently. You measured their output. You replaced them when they underperformed. But Parker was suggesting something different, that people weren't resources at all, that every memo, every comment, every casual dismissal created ripples in lives she never witnessed. Skylar looked around the small kitchen, at Mia's artwork on the refrigerator, at the chore chart where both their names were now listed, at the list of baking supplies Parker had left for tonight's cookies. For the first time in her adult life, she wondered if being right about business meant she'd been wrong about everything else. The real challenge came on day 9 of Skylar's stay, though the seeds had been planted throughout the previous week. She'd adapted to the apartment's routines with the same efficiency she applied to corporate restructuring. Morning coffee with Parker before he left for work, walking Mia to the bus stop, managing the household tasks that appeared on the refrigerator chart with surprising complexity. Grocery shopping on a budget, meal planning around both nutrition and cost, laundry in a shared basement facility where you needed quarters and patience. The endless small tasks that consumed hours she'd previously spent in meetings or reviewing reports. But the real test arrived via email on Tuesday morning. Cascade Tech's chief financial officer, Gregory Hamilton, the same executive who'd taken credit for Parker's work, had sent a division-wide memo. Mandatory efficiency review. All engineering teams would be evaluated for potential restructuring. Low performers would be identified and eliminated. The infrastructure division, Parker's division, was first on the list. Skylar read the memo with growing dread. She recognized this play. She'd approved this play. It was standard corporate strategy during quarterly reviews. Cut the bottom 10%. Redistribute their work to the top performers. Improve the metrics that investors cared about. She'd never considered what it meant to be in that bottom 10%. Or to work alongside people who might be. Parker came home that evening, quieter than usual. Mia noticed immediately. Bad day? She asked, looking up from her homework. Just work stuff, Parker said, but his voice carried an edge Skylar hadn't heard before. After Mia went to bed, Parker sat at the kitchen table with a beer he'd pulled from the refrigerator. Skylar joined him, uncertain what to say. You know about the review, he said. Not a question. I saw the memo. 3 people on my team are panicking. Jenna Park has a husband with medical issues. Their insurance is through Cascade Tech. If she's cut, they're destroyed. Miguel Santos just bought a house, stretched himself thin on the mortgage. He's terrified. Parker took a long drink. And then there's Anthony White, 24 years old, brilliant kid, still learning, still making mistakes. But he's going to be exceptional given time. But he won't get time. His performance metrics aren't high enough yet. He'll be in that bottom 10%. That's how business works, Skylar said, hearing how hollow the words sounded even as she spoke them. Right. That's how business works. You cut people like they're dead branches. Never mind that Anthony is supporting his mother who has dementia. Never mind that Jenna's husband has cancer. Never mind that Miguel's entire financial future is tied to keeping this job. They're just numbers. Bottom 10%. Eliminated. If they're not performing. Skylar started. Anthony is performing. Parker interrupted. He's learning. He's improving. 3 months ago, he couldn't debug complex systems. Now he can. 6 months from now, he'll be one of our best. But your metrics don't measure growth. They measure output at a single point in time. So what would you do? Skylar challenged. Keep everyone? Never make hard decisions? Companies can't work that way. Parker set down his beer and looked at her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. I'd look at the people making $500,000 a year who spend 6 hours a day in meetings that produce nothing. I'd question whether we need 17 vice presidents. I'd ask why Gregory Hamilton got a $200,000 bonus for work I did while Anthony White struggles to afford his mother's care facility. That's not how corporate structure works, Skylar said. I know. I used to be part of that structure. CTO salary, stock options, the whole package. You know what I learned? The people at the top protect each other. The people at the bottom pay the price. Every time. He stood, pacing the small kitchen. I know what you're going to say. That I'm being naive. That hard decisions have to be made. That if I understood the financial pressures, I'd see things differently. That is what I was going to say, Skylar admitted. Here's what I understand about financial pressure, Parker said. Cascade Tech reported $800 million in profit last quarter. Your compensation package last year was $45 million. The infrastructure division's entire annual budget is $60 million. You personally made 3/4 of what it costs to run the division that keeps your company functional. The numbers hung in the air between them. So when you talk about efficiency and cutting the bottom 10% to save maybe $4 million a year, what you're really saying is that your comfort matters more than 20 people's ability to feed their families. That's not fair, Skylar said, but her voice lacked conviction. Fair? Parker laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to talk about fair? Jenna Park makes $140,000 a year. She's good at her job. Not exceptional, but solid, reliable. But her husband got cancer, and she's been distracted, taking calls during work, leaving early for appointments. Her metrics are down 15% this quarter. He leaned against the counter. Gregory Hamilton makes $500,000 a year. He plays golf with board members. Takes 2-hour lunches. His actual productive work is maybe 10 hours a week. But he's networked. He's protected. He'll never be in that bottom 10%, no matter how little he actually does. You're simplifying, Skylar started. I'm clarifying, Parker interrupted. You've built a system that protects people like you and punishes people like Anthony. And you've convinced yourself it's meritocracy when it's really just class warfare. Skylar felt anger rising. I've worked for everything I have. Every promotion, every achievement. Nobody handed me anything. I believe you, Parker said. But once you got to the top, you pulled the ladder up behind you. Made it harder for people like Anthony to climb. Protected people like Gregory, who don't deserve protection. All while telling yourself, you're just being efficient. What do you want from me? Skylar asked, her voice rising. I'm living in your apartment, helping with your daughter, playing house in your working class world. What more do you want? Parker moved closer, his gray eyes steady. I want you to save them. What? Anthony, Jenna, Miguel. I want you to use your power to stop this review. To protect the people who actually do the work while executives collect bonuses for doing nothing. I can't just override company policy. Skylar started. You're the CEO, Parker said. You can do anything. That's what power means. You can save 20 people with one email. Or you can let them be destroyed because it's easier to follow the policy you created. He walked to the refrigerator and pulled out a folder. Inside were profiles. Anthony White, 24, supporting his mother. Jenna Park, 35, husband in chemotherapy. Miguel Santos, 29, new father, new mortgage. 20 people total. Each one a name, a story. A life that would be shattered by efficiency metrics. This is your impossible challenge, Parker said. Not fixing a generator or securing a chandelier. Choosing people over policy. Choosing what's right over what's efficient. Proving that your power means something beyond quarterly earnings. He set the folder in front of her. You have until Friday. That's when the review results go to the board. After that, it's too late. 20 people lose their jobs. 20 families face financial destruction. Also, Cascade Tech can improve its profit margins by 0.5%. Skylar stared at the folder like it was a bomb. This is why you made the bet. Not to teach me about working class life. To manipulate me into this exact situation. Yes, Parker admitted. I needed you to see them as people, first. As names and faces and lives that matter. I needed you to eat dinner at the same table as someone whose future you control. I needed you to understand that your decisions have consequences for real human beings. And if I don't? Skylar asked. If I let the review proceed? Parker's expression was unreadable. Then you go back to your penthouse in 2 days. Back to your isolated empire. And you'll have learned nothing except that the bet was a waste of time. He walked toward his bedroom, then paused. But I don't think you're that person anymore. I think 9 days in the real world changed something. I think you're starting to see what I see. That power without empathy is just tyranny dressed in expensive suits. He left her alone with the folder and a choice that felt impossible. Skylar didn't sleep that night. She sat at Parker's kitchen table until 3 in the morning, reading through every profile, learning names, understanding stories, seeing people instead of performance metrics. Anthony White had graduated from a state school, not an Ivy League. His code was functional but not elegant. He took longer to solve problems than his peers, but his improvement curve was steep. Every month he got better. Every challenge he overcame made him stronger. Jenna Park had been with Cascade Tech for 8 years. Solid performer. Never exceptional, but never a problem. Until 6 months ago when her husband's diagnosis had shattered her concentration. Her metrics showed the decline clearly. 15% reduction in output, 20% increase in errors. But they didn't show the nights she stayed late trying to make up work. The mornings she came in early before hospital visits. The way she was fighting to keep both her job and her husband alive. Miguel Santos was the anomaly. His performance was actually good, but he'd made the mistake of questioning Gregory Hamilton in a meeting, suggesting that the senior architect's approach to a problem was inefficient. He'd been right, but he'd embarrassed someone powerful. Now his name was on the list for reasons that had nothing to do with performance. 20 stories, 20 lives, 20 families who existed as numbers in a spreadsheet that would be presented to the board on Friday. Skylar thought about her mother, about how her father's betrayal had destroyed not just a marriage but a person's entire sense of self. About how financial devastation had compounded emotional trauma until Lin Chen had become a shadow of herself. These 20 people would face similar destruction. Jobs lost, insurance gone, mortgages defaulted, lives unraveled. Also, Cascade Tech could show slightly better margins to investors. By dawn, Skylar had made her decision. But implementing it would require the kind of political maneuvering she'd spent years perfecting. She called Bailey at 7 in the morning. I need the full financial breakdown for the executive compensation structure. Every VP, every senior director, every bonus paid in the last 3 years. I need it by noon. You're still in North Harbor, Bailey said. Skylar, the bet ends in 2 days. Can't this wait? No, it can't wait. Get me the information. Next, she called Gregory Hamilton directly. He answered on the 3rd ring, clearly annoyed at the early contact. We need to talk about the efficiency review. Skylar said without preamble. It's proceeding on schedule. Results to the board on Friday. I've identified significant redundancies in infrastructure. You've identified 20 people you want to eliminate. I've reviewed the list. We're not doing it. Silence on the other end. Then, Skylar, this was approved at the executive level. The board expects these cuts. We've already prepared the financial projections. Change the projections. We're not cutting infrastructure. Then where do you propose we find the savings? The board wants $4 million in reduced expenses. That's 20 positions at average infrastructure salary. Skylar smiled, though he couldn't see it. We're going to find it in executive compensation, starting with your bonus structure. Excuse me? You received $200,000 last March for fixing the server crash. Except you didn't fix it. Parker Drake did. You took credit for his work and profited from it. Consider that bonus retroactively eliminated. You can't do that. I absolutely can. Employment contracts allow for bonus reclamation based on false performance claims. You want to fight it? We can. Have that conversation with the board and explain how you've been systematically taking credit for your team's work. She could hear Hamilton breathing heavily on the other end. What do you want? I want you to revise the efficiency review. Remove all 20 names from infrastructure. Find your savings elsewhere. There is no elsewhere. Infrastructure is the obvious target. Then we'll reduce executive bonuses across the board. 10% cut for all VPs. That's $3 million right there. The remaining $1 million comes from eliminating redundant senior management positions. We have 17 VPs. I guarantee we can function with 15. The executive team will never agree to that. They will if the alternative is a full audit of performance justification. I'm prepared to bring in external consultants to evaluate executive productivity. How many of your peers do you think will survive that kind of scrutiny? Skylar stood, pacing Parker's small living room. Here's what's going to happen, Gregory. You're going to walk into that board meeting Friday and present a revised plan. Executive compensation adjustments, management restructuring, zero infrastructure cuts. You'll frame it as innovative leadership, sharing the burden, leading from the front. And if I refuse, then I'll present it myself. And I'll make sure everyone knows why the change was necessary, including your habit of taking credit for other people's work. Your career at Cascade Tech will be over by Monday. Another long silence. You've changed. Yes, Skylar said. I have. She ended the call and immediately opened her laptop. Started drafting the memo that would go out to all of Cascade Tech by end of day. The memo was 6 paragraphs. It announced a new initiative, Executive Accountability, in action. 10% reduction in executive bonuses. 2 VP positions eliminated through retirement incentives. Performance metrics adjusted to measure growth and improvement. Not just point in time, output. And a new policy. No employee would be terminated for performance reasons without mandatory review by both direct management and an employee advocacy panel. It was revolutionary by corporate standards. It would cost her political capital. Some executives would resign in protest. The board would push back hard. But it would save 20 people, 20 families, 20 lives. She sent the draft to Bailey with instructions to have legal review it immediately. Then she called an emergency executive meeting for Thursday morning, before the board meeting on Friday. Parker came home at his usual time to find Skylar still on her laptop, surrounded by financial documents and policy drafts. You're still working on this? He asked. I'm rewriting corporate policy. It takes time. He looked at the screen, reading over her shoulder. She watched his expression change as he processed what she was doing. You're actually doing it, he said quietly. You're saving them. I'm trying. The board might override me. The executive team will definitely fight it. But I'm trying. Parker sat down across from her. What will this cost you? Politically? A lot. Some executives will leave, others will undermine me. It'll take months to stabilize the power structure again. That's not what I meant. Skylar met his eyes. I know what you meant. It'll cost me the certainty that I'm right. The comfort of believing that business is just business. The distance that makes hard decisions easy. She closed her laptop, but the alternative is looking at Mia and knowing I destroyed families just like hers because I was too comfortable to care. You've learned something, Parker said. It wasn't a question. I've learned that you were right. Power without empathy is tyranny, and I've been a tyrant hiding behind efficiency metrics and shareholder value. She stood, exhausted but determined. The board meeting is Friday. I need to be there. I need to present this in person and fight for it. Which means the bet ends tomorrow instead of Saturday. The bet ended the moment you decided to fight. Parker said, everything after this is just you choosing who you want to be. That night, Skylar helped Mia with her math homework. They made dinner together, pasta with sauce from a jar because neither of them could cook well. They watched a documentary about robotics that Mia had recorded, and Skylar realized something fundamental had shifted. She wasn't playing house anymore. She wasn't enduring a bet or learning a lesson. She was experiencing what it meant to care about people beyond their utility, to see humans instead of resources, to understand that every decision rippled outward in ways that spreadsheets never captured. Friday morning, she put on one of her power suits that she'd had Bailey bring over, stood in front of the mirror in Mia's small bathroom, looked at herself with new eyes. She was still Skylar Bowen, CEO of Cascade Tech Solutions, but she was also someone who spent 2 weeks in the real world, who'd learned that power meant responsibility, not just authority. She walked into that board meeting carrying a folder with 20 names, 20 stories, 20 lives she was going to fight for, regardless of the cost. And for the first time in years, she felt like the power she wielded actually meant something beyond quarterly earnings and stock prices. The boardroom at Cascade Tech Solutions occupied the entire top floor of the headquarters building in Belmont Heights. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the bay. The conference table was custom Italian marble. The chairs cost more than most people's cars. Skylar had conducted hundreds of meetings in this room. She'd fired executives here, approved acquisitions here, made decisions that affected thousands of lives with the stroke of a pen. But walking in Friday morning felt different. She carried Parker's folder with 20 names, and every board member's eyes tracked her movement with predatory interest. They'd received her memo. They knew what she was proposing, and they were ready for war. Let's begin, Skylar said, taking her seat at the head of the table. I'm sure you've all reviewed the revised efficiency proposal. Malcolm Chambers, the board chairman, and her father's former business partner, leaned back in his chair. We've reviewed it, and frankly, Skylar, we're concerned. This isn't like you. What isn't like me? She asked. Sentimentality. We have a structural problem in the infrastructure division. 20 positions that aren't performing to standard. The solution is clear. We eliminate the problem. The problem, Skylar said carefully, is how we define performance. And who pays the price for efficiency? She opened the folder. Anthony White, 24 years old. His performance metrics show him in the bottom 10%. But if you look at his trajectory over the past 6 months, he's improved 40%. His error rate is down, his code quality is up. He's learning faster than anyone else in the division. That's irrelevant, Gregory Hamilton said from his seat near the middle. Current performance is what matters. Potential doesn't pay the bills. Potential is exactly what pays the bills, Skylar countered. We're a tech company. Innovation requires people who grow, who learn, who get better. Anthony White is getting better. But we'd fire him because he's not perfect yet. She pulled out another profile. Jenna Park. 8 years with this company. Stellar record until 6 months ago when her husband was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. Her performance dipped 15% while she tried to keep him alive and keep her job. We'd fire her for having a medical crisis in her family. Business doesn't stop for personal problems, Malcolm said. That's an unfortunate reality. Is it? Skylar asked. Or is that just what we tell ourselves, so we don't have to acknowledge the human cost of our decisions? She stood, pacing the length of the table. Miguel Santos. His performance is actually above average, but he's on the list because he questioned Gregory Hamilton's approach to a technical problem. He was right, by the way. Gregory's solution would have cost us an extra $2 million in server expenses. But Miguel embarrassed someone powerful, so he gets punished. Gregory's face reddened. That's not why he's on the list. It's exactly why he's on the list, Skylar interrupted. I've reviewed the metrics. His performance justifies keeping him. The only reason for termination is politics. Malcolm held up a hand. Skylar, we understand you're passionate about this. But the board approved these cuts for a reason. We need to show investors that we're serious about operational efficiency. $4 million in savings sends a message. What message? Skylar asked. That we eat our own people to please Wall Street? That workers are disposable but executives are protected? She placed a different document on the table. Here's an alternative message. Executive accountability. We cut executive bonuses by 10%. We eliminate 2 VP positions through retirement incentives. We restructure senior management to reduce redundancy. And we implement performance metrics that measure growth and improvement, not just single point-in-time output. You're proposing we punish our top performers, another board member said. The executives who've built this company. I'm proposing we share the burden, Skylar corrected. Gregory Hamilton made $700,000 last year. Anthony White made $90,000. But when cuts come, who pays? The person making $90,000 while the person making $700,000 stays protected. She leaned forward, hands on the marble table. We reported $800 million in profit last quarter. We can afford to keep 20 people employed. We can afford to invest in their growth. We can afford to be a company that doesn't sacrifice workers to pad executive bonuses. This is about more than money, Malcolm said quietly. This is about your judgment. You've been acting erratically. Taking time off. Living in some employee's apartment. The whispers are starting, Skylar. People are questioning whether you're fit to lead. There it was. The real issue. Not the policy change, but her perceived weakness. Her deviation from the cold efficiency they expected. My judgment is fine, Skylar said. What's changed is my perspective. I've spent 2 weeks seeing how the other half lives, understanding what our policies actually mean for the people affected by them. That doesn't make me weak, it makes me informed. It makes you compromised, Gregory said. You've gotten too close to your employees. Lost objectivity. This Parker Drake has clearly influenced you. Parker Drake, Skylar said, her voice dropping to something dangerous, is the engineer who fixed the March server crash that you took credit for, who saved this company $40 million in losses while you were playing golf. Don't speak his name like it's a weakness when he's twice the asset you'll ever be. The room went silent. I'm implementing these changes, Skylar continued. With or without board approval. I have the authority as CEO to restructure executive compensation. I have the authority to modify performance review criteria, and I'm prepared to use that authority. Malcolm stood. The board can remove you, Skylar. If we determine you're not acting in the company's best interests, we can vote you out. You can try, Skylar agreed. But it requires a 2/3 majority. And I've been CEO for 6 years. I've delivered consistent growth, impressive returns, and shareholder value. You'd need to prove incompetence or malfeasance. Choosing to protect employees instead of cutting them isn't either. She gathered her materials. The revised efficiency plan goes into effect Monday. Infrastructure stays intact. Executive compensation adjusts. Anyone who can't accept that is welcome to resign. Skylar walked out of the boardroom, her heart pounding but her head clear. She just declared war on her own board. challenged the power structure that had enabled her rise. Chosen 20 strangers over the executives who'd supported her career. It was corporate suicide, and it felt like the first honest thing she'd done in years. Parker was waiting in the lobby when she emerged. He'd taken the day off, claiming he needed to be there. Mia sat beside him, swinging her legs, reading a book about female engineers. "How did it go?" he asked. "I either saved 20 people or ended my career," Skylar said. "Possibly both." Mia looked up from her book. "Did you win?" Skylar smiled despite the turmoil churning in her chest. "I don't know yet, but I fought. That's what matters." They walked out of the building together, and Skylar realized something fundamental. Parker wasn't just the bet she'd lost. He wasn't just the lesson she'd learned. He was becoming something else entirely. Someone whose opinion mattered, whose respect she craved more than board approval. Someone who'd seen her at her worst and challenged her to become better. That evening, back at the apartment that no longer felt foreign, they made dinner together while Mia practiced violin in her room. The music filtered through the walls, imperfect, but earnest. "You know what happens next," Parker said. Chopping vegetables with the same precision he applied to code. "The board will push back. Executives will revolt. You've made powerful enemies today." "I know," Skylar said. "Some will try to force you out. Others will undermine you. This won't be easy." "Nothing worth doing is easy," Skylar replied, and realized she was quoting something he'd said earlier in the week. Parker set down his knife and turned to face her. "Why did you really do it? You could have walked away, finished the bet, gone back to your penthouse, forgotten about all of this." "Because of what you said. About Mia watching to see if I was mean or just busy. About the difference mattering." She met his eyes. "I don't want to be the person who looks through people, who treats humans like resources, who builds success on other people's destruction. I want to be someone Mia could look up to, someone who deserves respect instead of just demanding it." Parker moved closer. "That's the first time you've ever cared what a 9-year-old thinks of you." "That's the first time I've ever had a 9-year-old in my life long enough to care," Skylar admitted. The air between them shifted, charged with something that had been building for 2 weeks. Recognition became attraction. Respect became something deeper. "The bet's over," Parker said, quietly. "You can go home, back to your real life." "What if I don't want to?" Skylar asked. Before Parker could respond, Mia burst into the kitchen, violin in hand. "Can Skylar stay for my recital next week? Please." She promised she'd come, and I want her there. Skylar looked at the girl who'd somehow become important in just 2 weeks, then at the father who'd orchestrated this entire situation to teach her something she'd needed to learn. "I'll be there," Skylar promised. Front row. After Mia went to bed, Skylar and Parker sat on the small balcony overlooking the parking lot. Not the bay view from her penthouse, but something more real, more grounded. "I should probably go back to my place," Skylar said. "The bet's over. I've learned my lesson." "Have you?" Parker asked. "I've learned that I was wrong. About people, about what matters, about using power responsibly, instead of just efficiently." Parker was quiet for a moment. "You've learned the easy part. The hard part is living it. Every day. When the board pressures you, when executives push back, when the easy choice is to revert to old patterns." "I won't," Skylar said. "You might. Because change is hard. And you've built your entire identity around being untouchable. Letting people in, caring about their stories, seeing them as humans instead of resources that makes you vulnerable." He looked at her directly. "Are you ready for that? To be vulnerable? To care?" Skylar thought about her mother. About years of protection and isolation. About armor built from trauma and maintained through loneliness. "I don't know," she admitted. But I want to try. Parker smiled. That's honest. I can work with honest. Work with? Skylar asked. I'm not done teaching you yet. The bet might be over, but the lesson continues. If you're willing. Skylar realized what he was offering. Not just friendship. Not just respect. But a chance to keep learning. Keep growing. Keep becoming someone better than who she'd been. I'm willing, she said. The call from her father came 3 days after the board meeting. Skylar had been expecting it, but that didn't make it easier when his name appeared on her phone screen. She was at Parker's apartment, helping Mia with a science project about renewable energy. The simple domestic scene felt like armor she could hide behind, but she knew better than to avoid David Chen when he was determined to speak. Hello, Father, she answered. What have you done? His voice was cold, controlled. The tone he used when he was genuinely angry rather than just disappointed. I've restructured our efficiency program, prioritized employee retention over executive bonuses. I believe we discussed this in the board briefing. Don't play games with me, Skylar. Malcolm called me, told me about your performance in the board meeting, about how you've been living with some employee, about how you're throwing away everything you've built for what? A social experiment? Skylar walked into Parker's bedroom, closing the door. It's not a social experiment. It's called being a responsible leader. It's called career suicide. David corrected. You've alienated your board. Antagonized your executive team. Made yourself look weak and sentimental. Do you understand what you've done? I've saved 20 people's jobs. You've destroyed your credibility. His voice rose, rare emotion breaking through. I spent 30 years building connections in this industry. Connections you've benefited from. Doors that opened because you're David Chen's daughter. And you're throwing it away for what? 20 mediocre employees who'll be gone in 5 years anyway? The words stung because they echoed her own thoughts from weeks ago, when people were resources and efficiency was everything. They're not mediocre, Skylar said quietly. They're human beings with families and lives that matter. Since when do you care about that? David asked. You've never cared about that. You've always understood that business requires hard choices. That's why you succeeded. Because you weren't soft like your mother. The mention of her mother ignited something in Skylar's chest. Don't talk about Mom. Why not? It's the truth. She was soft. She let emotions cloud her judgment. She trusted the wrong people, and it destroyed her. I taught you better than that. I taught you to be hard, to be smart, to protect yourself. You taught me to be isolated, Skylar corrected. You taught me to treat people like assets, to value money over connection, to believe that caring about anyone was weakness. It is weakness, David said. Look at what's happened to you. 2 weeks with this maintenance worker and you've lost your edge. You're making decisions based on feelings instead of facts. You're vulnerable now, Skylar, and vulnerable people get destroyed in business. Parker's not a maintenance worker. He's a senior engineer. And he's not destroying me. He's teaching me to be better. Better? David laughed, harsh and knowing. He's teaching you to be poor, to settle, to care about things that don't matter. How long before you're living in that apartment permanently? Before you've given up everything you've worked for? Maybe I should, Skylar said, surprising herself with the words. Maybe everything I've worked for is built on the wrong foundation. Silence on the other end. Then, you're in love with him. It wasn't a question. And Skylar realized it was true. Somewhere, between the poker game and the board meeting, between learning to budget groceries and fighting for 20 strangers, she'd fallen in love with Parker Drake. Yes, she admitted. I am. Then you're exactly like your mother, David said, throwing away your future for a man who can't possibly understand your world. This will end the same way, Skylar. Badly. Painfully. And I won't be there to pick up the pieces. He ended the call before she could respond. Skylar sat on Parker's bed, her father's words echoing. She thought about her mother's collapse, about how loving the wrong person had destroyed Lin Chen's life, about how vulnerability had led to devastation. But Parker wasn't her father. He wasn't charming and manipulative. He was honest, sometimes brutally so. He challenged her to be better, not to sacrifice herself. The difference mattered. That weekend, her father made his move. He called an emergency shareholder meeting. As a major investor who'd helped fund Skylar's initial acquisition of Cascade Tech, he had the power to demand board review of CEO performance. The meeting was scheduled for the following Friday. Skylar would have to defend every decision she'd made. Her compensation structure changes, her policy modifications, her refusal to cut infrastructure, and her relationship with Parker Drake, which had somehow leaked to the tech blogs. The headlines were predictably vicious. CEO falls for employee. Power imbalance at Cascade Tech. Skylar Bowen's judgment questioned. Parker found her on his balcony Wednesday evening, staring at her phone where the latest article proclaimed her a cautionary tale about mixing business with pleasure. "You okay?" he asked. "My father is trying to remove me as CEO. The board is split. Half think I've lost my mind. The media is tearing me apart, and I have to defend all of it in 2 days." She set down her phone. "This is what you wanted, isn't it? To show me that caring about people has consequences. That vulnerability makes you weak." "No," Parker said firmly. "This is what happens when you challenge power structures, when you prioritize people over profit, when you refuse to play by rules designed to protect the people at the top." He sat beside her. "Your father isn't attacking you because you fell in love. He's attacking you because you're threatening the system that made him successful. A system that requires people like Anthony White to be disposable, so people like him can stay comfortable." "But he's right about one thing," Skylar said. "I've made myself vulnerable. I've given my enemies ammunition. I've risked everything I've built." "For what?" Parker asked. "For 20 people I barely know. For a relationship that might not even work. For the chance to be someone better than who I was." Parker took her hand. "That's not vulnerability. That's courage. Vulnerability is passive. Courage is choosing to care even when it costs you something." "It's costing me everything," Skylar said. "Is it? You still have your intelligence, your skills, your work ethic. You still have everything that made you successful, minus the isolation that made you miserable. That's not loss. That's growth." Mia appeared in the doorway, clutching her stuffed violin. "Are you leaving?" she asked Skylar. "What? No. Why would you think that? I heard Dad tell his friend that you might have to go away. That your job might end. I don't want you to go away." Skylar felt something crack in her chest. This girl, who she'd met 3 weeks ago, who she'd helped with homework and science projects and violin practice, had become important. Real. Someone whose opinion mattered more than board approval. "I don't want to go away either," Skylar said. "Then don't," Mia said with 9-year-old certainty. "Dad says when things are hard, you don't run away. You fix them. Can't you fix this?" After Mia went to bed, Skylar made a decision. She called Bailey and told her to prepare a comprehensive defense for the shareholder meeting. Every decision documented, every policy change justified, every criticism answered with data. But more than that, she called the 20 people she'd saved, spoke to each one personally, heard their stories directly. Anthony's gratitude, Jenna's relief, Miguel's appreciation. By the time she finished, it was past midnight. Parker was still up, working on code at the kitchen table. "I'm going to fight," Skylar told him. "Not just for my position, for everything. For the policy changes, for the right to care about people, for us." Parker looked up from his laptop. "Us. Yes, us. Whatever this is, I'm fighting for it. Because you were right. Power without empathy is tyranny. But power with empathy can change things, can protect people, can matter." She sat across from him. "I might lose. My father might win. The board might remove me, but I'm going to fight anyway." Parker smiled, and it transformed his entire face. Now you're getting it. The shareholder meeting took place in the same boardroom where Skylar had fought for 20 jobs 2 weeks earlier. But this time, the room was packed. Every board member, major shareholders, her father, and a phalanx of corporate lawyers ready to dissect her every decision. David Chen sat near the head of the table, looking every inch the successful executive he'd always been. Silver hair perfectly styled, expensive suit, expression calm and controlled. He looked at Skylar without emotion, and she saw herself reflected in that coldness. This was who she'd been becoming, who she would have become if Parker hadn't challenged her. Malcolm Chambers opened the meeting. We're here to review CEO performance in light of recent decisions that have concerned major shareholders. David Chen has raised questions about judgment, leadership stability, and potential conflicts of interest. David stood, commanding attention the way he always had. My daughter has made a series of troubling decisions. She's restructured executive compensation without proper board approval. She's modified performance review criteria against the recommendations of senior leadership, and she's entered into a personal relationship with a subordinate employee, creating liability and perception issues. He placed a folder on the table. I've documented everything. The policy changes that have cost this company money, the executive departures that have destabilized leadership, the media coverage that has damaged our reputation. Skylar has allowed personal feelings to compromise her professional judgment. Other board members nodded. The lawyers made notes. This was a coordinated attack, planned and executed with precision. Does the CEO wish to respond? Malcolm asked. Skylar stood, her own folder in hand. But instead of opening it, she looked directly at her father. You're right, she said. I've changed. 2 weeks ago, I would have cut 20 people without hesitation. I would have seen them as numbers on a spreadsheet. Problems to be eliminated. I would have been exactly the kind of leader you taught me to be. She walked around the table. But then I met Parker Drake and his daughter Mia. I lived in their apartment, helped with homework, made dinner, experienced what life is actually like for the people affected by my decisions. That's exactly the problem. David started. Let me finish. Skylar interrupted. You taught me that emotions are weakness, that caring about people is liability, that success requires isolation and ruthlessness. And I believed you. For 13 years, I believed you. She stopped in front of him. But you were wrong. The isolation didn't make me strong. It made me cruel. The ruthlessness didn't make me successful. It made me empty. And the belief that people are disposable didn't make me a good leader. It made me a tyrant. This is exactly what I'm talking about, David said to the board. She's become emotional, unstable, unfit to lead. I'm not unstable, Skylar corrected. I'm finally stable. For the first time in my adult life, I understand what leadership actually means. Not just making profitable decisions, but making right decisions. Not just protecting the top, but protecting everyone. She opened her folder. You want data? Fine. Since implementing the revised policies, employee satisfaction is up 40%. Retention and infrastructure is at a 5-year high. Productivity has actually increased because people aren't terrified of being fired for having human problems. She placed the documents on the table. The 20 people I saved? Anthony White just debugged a critical system that would have cost us $10 million if it had failed in production. Jenna Park developed a new protocol that's saving us $3 million annually in server costs. Miguel Santos designed an architecture improvement that's increased efficiency by 20%. Those are individual cases, Gregory Hamilton started. Those are 20 individual cases that prove my point, Skylar interrupted. People aren't disposable. They're investments. Give them support instead of threats, and they deliver results. She turned back to her father. You asked what I've accomplished by caring about people. I've built a more stable company, more loyal employees, better results, and I've become someone I can actually respect. At what cost? David asked. You've made enemies of your executive team, alienated the board, risked your position. For what? A maintenance worker and his daughter. Parker is not a maintenance worker, Skylar said, her voice hard. He's a former CTO who sacrificed a fortune to be a good father, who has more integrity in his little finger than most executives have in their entire careers. And yes, I'm in love with him. That's not a liability. It's the best decision I've ever made. The room erupted. Board members talking over each other. David looking furious. Malcolm trying to restore order. This proves my point, David said loudly. She's let personal feelings compromise everything. She's unfit to lead this company. Then remove me, Skylar said. The room went silent. If you think caring about people is a liability, remove me. If you think protecting employees instead of executives is wrong, remove me. If you think falling in love makes me weak, remove me. But know this, I will not go back to being who I was. I will not treat humans like resources. I will not build success on other people's suffering. She looked at each board member. You have a choice. Keep a CEO who believes people matter, or replace me with someone who'll go back to the old way. Cut costs by cutting people. Protect executives while sacrificing workers. Build profit on the backs of families who can't fight back. Malcolm cleared his throat. The board will need to deliberate. No, Skylar said. We're doing this now. You want me out? Vote. Right here. Right now. 2/3 majority removes me. Let's see if you have the courage to actually do it. The tension in the room was suffocating. Board members looked at each other, at David, at the lawyers, trying to determine the political calculus. Finally, Malcolm called for the vote. Of the 12 board members present, 7 voted to retain Skylar as CEO. 4 voted to remove her. 1 abstained. She'd won. Barely. But she'd won. David stood, his face a mask of controlled fury. This is a mistake. She'll destroy this company with her sentimentality. And when she does, don't come to me for help. He walked out without another word, and Skylar felt something break free inside her. The last chain of her father's expectations, the final weight of his disappointment. She'd chosen herself over his approval, chosen people over profit, chosen love over isolation, and somehow, against all odds, she'd survived. The meeting dissolved into chaos as board members debated and lawyers argued about the implications. But Skylar was already walking out, pulling out her phone, calling Parker. How did it go? He answered. I won. Barely, but I won. Where are you? Leaving now. I'm coming home. She heard his smile through the phone. Home? Your apartment. If the offer still stands. I don't want to go back to my penthouse. I want to be where you are. Where Mia is. Where life is real, instead of just successful. The offer stands, Parker said. Always. Skylar walked out of the Cascade Tech building, leaving behind the corporate fortress she'd built. She didn't know what the future held. Whether her father would ever forgive her, whether the board would eventually force her out anyway. But she knew who she was now. Not David Chen's daughter. Not the Ice Queen of Silicon Valley. Just Skylar, someone who'd learned that power meant nothing if you used it to hurt people. That success was hollow without connection. That love wasn't weakness, it was the only thing that made strength worthwhile. She drove to North Harbor, to the modest apartment building, to the life she was choosing over everything else. Parker and Mia were waiting at the door when she arrived. You came back, Mia said. I came home, Skylar corrected. And she meant it. The community center in North Harbor hadn't existed 4 years ago. Now, it occupied an entire city block, a modern building with glass walls and solar panels, funded by a partnership between Cascade Tech Solutions and the Drake Foundation. Skylar stood in the main hall, watching 50 teenagers work on coding projects at brand new workstations. The program was called Second Chances, designed for students who'd fallen through the cracks of traditional education. Kids who needed support, patience, and someone willing to invest in their potential rather than judge their current performance. Anthony White supervised one group, his teaching style patient and encouraging. He'd been promoted to senior architect at Cascade Tech 2 years ago. Jenna Park ran another section, her husband now in remission and their financial stability restored. Miguel Santos coordinated the robotics division, where students built projects that actually mattered to their communities. Pretty impressive, Parker said, appearing at her elbow with 2 cups of coffee. Remember when you thought people were just resources to be optimized? Skylar took the coffee, leaning into him. They'd been married for 3 years. Now, a small ceremony at the community center with Mia as maid of honor. No corporate spectacle, just family, friends, and the 20 people whose jobs she'd saved. I try not to remember that version of myself too often, Skylar admitted. She was exhausting. She was also brilliant, driven, and capable of changing when it mattered, Parker said. That's the version I saw across the poker table. Someone who could be better if she had a reason to be. The poker game felt like another lifetime. Skylar had been so certain of victory, so confident in her read of the situation. Parker had seen right through her, engineered the perfect bet, forced her into a situation that would crack her armor. Did you know, she asked, when you made that bet, did you know I'd fall in love with you? Parker smiled. I knew you were lonely. I knew you were isolated. I knew you'd built walls so high you couldn't see over them anymore. I thought maybe 2 weeks in the real world would give you perspective. The falling in love part was a surprise. A good surprise? The best surprise, he confirmed, kissing her temple. Across the room, Mia worked with a group of younger students, explaining code with the same patience her father had always shown. At 13, she was already being courted by elite high schools, but she'd insisted on staying local. The best people aren't always at the best schools, she'd told them, with wisdom beyond her years. She'd grown tall, confident, brilliant in ways that had nothing to do with test scores. She still played violin, but she'd added coding, robotics, and activism to her repertoire. Last month, she'd presented to the city council about increasing funding for public education. Her arguments had been so compelling that they'd approved the budget increase. Your daughter terrifies me, Skylar said, in the best possible way. Our daughter, Parker corrected gently. Skylar felt the familiar warmth of those words. Parker had asked if she wanted to adopt Mia legally 6 months after the wedding. The paperwork had been finalized a year ago. Mia had 2 mothers now. Diana, who sent gifts and video calls from New York, and Skylar, who helped with homework and attended every recital. It wasn't conventional, but it worked. Cascade Tech had transformed under Skylar's continued leadership. The board had stabilized once it became clear that her policies actually improved performance. Employee retention was at industry highs. Innovation had increased. Profit margins were strong, just distributed more equitably. She'd implemented mentorship programs, flexible work arrangements, and performance metrics that measured growth over time rather than single point-in-time output. The company had become known not just for technical excellence, but for actually caring about the humans who created it. Some executives had left. Gregory Hamilton had resigned after his bonus reclamation, taking a position at a competitor where he promptly failed. Others had adapted, learning that supporting employees didn't mean sacrificing results. Her father had never reconciled with her decision. They spoke occasionally, stiff conversations about business that avoided anything personal. He'd remarried, was living in Singapore, as isolated in his success as Skylar had once been. She'd tried to reach out, to explain, to help him understand. But David Chen was committed to his beliefs about strength and vulnerability. Some people never changed. Skylar had made peace with that. She couldn't save everyone, but she could save the people within her reach. The Drake Foundation, funded primarily by Skylar's wealth, operated 12 community centers across the state now, each one focused on supporting working families, after-school programs, adult education, job training, mental health services, the things that made the difference between surviving and thriving. Parker managed the technical infrastructure, while maintaining his position at Cascade Tech. He'd been promoted to VP of Engineering, a role he'd initially resisted until Skylar pointed out that he could create policies that protected people like Anthony, Jenna, and Miguel. "Remember when you told me I'd given up nothing that mattered?" Skylar asked. "That night in your apartment?" "I remember. You were right. I lost some board members. Lost my father's approval. Lost the reputation for being untouchable. But I gained everything that actually matters. You, Mia, purpose beyond profit. Connection instead of isolation." She watched the students in the hall, their faces bright with concentration and hope. "That bet you made? Best thing that ever happened to me." Parker laughed. "You lost a poker hand and gained a life. That's a pretty good return on investment." "The best investment I ever made," Skylar agreed. "Though technically you made it for me. I just provided the opportunity. You're the one who chose to take it. You're the one who fought the board, challenged your father, risked everything to become better." Mia approached them, a younger student trailing behind her. "Mom, this is Casey. She's interested in the robotics program, but doesn't think she's smart enough. Can you tell her about starting from zero?" Skylar knelt down to Casey's level. "When I was your age, I thought success meant being better than everyone else. It took me a long time to learn that real success means helping everyone get better together. You know what makes you smart enough? Showing up, trying, being willing to learn. Everything else is just practice." Casey's face brightened. "Really? Really? And between you and me?" Skylar lowered her voice conspiratorially. "I once thought people were just resources on a spreadsheet. But Mia and her dad taught me that people are possibilities. You're not a resource, Casey. You're a possibility. And possibilities are the most valuable things in the world." After Casey ran back to her group, Mia hugged Skylar. "You're really good at this." "At what?" "Being a mom, being a person, being someone who makes people feel like they matter." Skylar held her daughter close, feeling Parker's hand on her back. Surrounded by the community they'd built together. 4 years ago, she'd lost a bet and thought her life was over. Instead, it had finally begun. She'd learned that fixing broken things, whether generators, chandelier, or lives, required the same fundamental skill, seeing the value in what others dismissed, recognizing that everything broken could be repaired with patience, expertise, and genuine care. Parker had seen that in her, recognized the person she could become beneath the armor she'd built. He'd made a bet that she could change, could grow, could become someone who used power to build instead of destroy. She'd won by losing. Lost her isolation and gained a family. Lost her untouchable reputation and gained authentic respect. Lost the safety of emotional distance and gained the risk and reward of genuine love. "Hey," Parker said softly. "You okay?" Skylar smiled, truly smiled, in a way the Ice Queen of Silicon Valley never could have. "I'm better than okay. I'm home." And standing in that community center, surrounded by people whose lives she'd fought to protect, holding the hand of the man who'd challenged her to be better, watching their daughter inspire the next generation, Skylar Bowen finally understood what it meant to have it all. Not power without connection, not success without purpose, not achievement without love, but all of it, together, messy and complicated and real. Exactly the way life was meant to be lived. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.